On the 24th of November 2025, my heart caught in my throat. My phone had lit up with a message from the Game Boy Dev Discord. The results of the GB Compo 2025 Game Jam were in. I couldn't quite take in the entire message. The only thing that stood out for me were the words "Congrats" and "Fortune and Glory" by Video Game Storytime. I had done it. I had made it onto the leaderboard for this game jam. Not only that, as I looked at the leaderboard, I discovered that my little game about an archaeologist mouse had somehow won second place in the entire game jam. Second place? That is such a foreign concept to me. I don't win anything. Coming second is the best that I have ever done at anything, and I don't entirely know how to deal with that. But rather than just sit here and tell you the story of a game that you've never heard of before, I thought we'd do something a little bit different. I want to make a guide, or at least a collection of pieces of advice, for anyone who may be looking to enter game jams. I can't tell you how to win game jams, but I can tell you how to almost win game jams, and that is almost as useful. Hopefully this video doesn't feel too self-indulgent or like I know absolutely everything about game design. I'm just a humble little indie dev who got a bit lucky and wants to share what they learned along the way. The timing of this video and me wanting to talk to you about the experience of developing this game is not an accident. I've been putting off making this video for a very long time at this point. But now is the moment that I need to tell you about this game, because I'm launching a Kickstarter for it. If you have any interest at all in playing Fortune and Glory, please do check that out and consider supporting it. You can go to itch.io right now to play either the version of the game that was submitted for the Game Jam, or a new demo for the game, which has an additional level and a bunch of other features, including a second playable character. The game can be played in browser, but it was developed to be played on Game Boy hardware, so if you have any kind of emulator that runs Game Boy games, or you've got a flash cartridge for authentic original Game Boy hardware, you can download the game and play it on that instead. So then, Fortune and Glory.
Fortune and glory, kid. Fortune and glory.
The GB Compo Game Jam has run a few times now, every 2 years, with entrants encouraged to make something, a game, a music collection, or a demo scene thingy for original Game Boy or Game Boy Color hardware. The jam takes place over a 3-month period, and at the end of that, judges will rank all of the games. The ones that perform the best receive prizes. That is my sales pitch for the Game Jam, should you have any interest in entering yourself in future years. With the advent of software like GB Studio, making a homebrew Game Boy game is easier than it has ever been, and the creative community around these games keeps growing. This time around, inspired by Indiana Jones, I decided to make a dungeon-crawling platformer. There's more than a little Disney cartoon tie-in game in this DNA as well, think DuckTales or Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers. That's fitting because those cartoons borrowed from Indiana Jones, who in turn borrowed from Disney Comics by the legendary Carl Barks. In previous years I have entered the GB Compo Game Jam and other game jams, but I've never made something that made much of a splash, which leads me to my first piece of advice. Suggestion number 1, fail. You should aim to make bad games. You should aim to make good games that aren't good enough. You should try your best, but be satisfied with defeat. Trust me, I am, as mentioned, well acquainted with failure. Failure is a good thing. In one previous game jam, I made a whole game about a character who keeps losing at everything he does. I think that game ranked 10th in that particular game jam, which is a respectable result. Do you know what's good about aiming to fail? There's no pressure. You can make something, throw it out into the ether, and then learn the lessons you need to learn from it and move on. I recommend entering as many game jams as you feel comfortable and aiming to just do okay in them. During the 3-month window that everyone was making these games, there was a lot of noise within the GB Studio community from people who were either A, desperate to win, or B, weren't sure whether or not they were actually going to submit their games because they didn't think they would be good enough. To anyone in either of those categories, I say, the purpose of entering a game jam is not to win. Many jams don't even have prizes or official rankings. The point of a game jam is to push yourself to make something that you wouldn't have made otherwise. The true prize at the end is that you have made something, anything, that you can be proud of, and if you happen to get a little bit of attention or recognition or whatever, that is a bonus. A few years ago I made a somewhat rough around the edges Game Boy visual novel about a teddy bear who is saying goodbye to their owner before they go off to university. Think Toy Story 3 meets Doki Doki Literature Club. It's not perfect, but I'm proud of it. It received some quite harsh feedback from the jam's judges. One person complained that you have to press the A button too often to advance the text, which suggests to me that perhaps a visual novel was not the appropriate style of game to make for this particular game jam. Here's the funny thing though, I don't know why, but for whatever reason, perhaps I've hit a particularly useful keyword there somewhere, that game keeps getting traffic years after that game jam finished. I didn't do particularly well in the jam at all, but almost every day somebody visits the page for that game, someone either downloads it or plays it. It is a little bit baffling. As I say, even that is a bit of a bonus because I've made plenty of game jam games that no one is regularly playing, but I have learned something every time I have entered a jam. Anyway, that complaint about the game having too much text in it does lead me to my second piece of advice. Suggestion number 2. Make your game as accessible as humanly possible. This is an important one. In fact, this might be the single most important piece of advice in this video. After my sad teddy bear game and a few other text-heavy experiments, my next game jam entry was a little arcade game about colourful fireballs that I submitted to the GB Showdown game jam, run by the delightful Tronimal. This is the epitome of a small community-run game jam, and bless him, Tronimal made the point after the jam was finished of playing every single one of the entries on stream. It took him a week. At the beginning of the week he was fresh-faced, enthusiastic, having a wonderful time. By the end of the week, maybe that was less true. After hours and hours of playing these games, he was a bit less positive. He began to have a visible negative reaction to a lot of the text in these games, especially if the font was small or difficult to read, or there were just walls and walls of text without anything else. Exactly the kind of game that I had been making for jams previously. Here's an important thing. Tronimal is not a native English speaker, he's from Germany. While his English is really solid, there was still a barrier to entry there that, he noted on stream, was making this even more difficult for him. I suddenly realised watching him that it's very presumptive to make a game jam game and just assume that everybody else is very comfortable with my language. It makes it a lot harder for someone playing the game to actually get the most out of it. Although I should point out I have also entered game jams that are narrative based or are storytelling based, visual novel game jams, text only game jams, so I'm not saying that there is never any place for text in these games, I'm just saying that you want to make that text as easy to read and to pass as possible. So for my entry in the GB Compo 2023 game jam, I tried to make a game with no text whatsoever, just pictures explaining everything. Except I didn't do a great job at that. In hindsight, I should have at least put in enough text to explain how the game works. I'd come up with a complicated gameplay loop that involves leaping between falling platforms while throwing water balloons at a bomb to prevent it from exploding. There is a lot going on there, and with no explanation, players were immediately confused. So making your game accessible means more than just no text. I should have had some kind of tutorial rather than throwing the player in at the deep end and expecting them to learn to swim with no guidance. This leads me to Fortune and Glory. I did strongly consider including text in cutscenes, but I ultimately left this out. It wasn't necessary. But to make sure that the gameplay was nice and simple to grasp, I used the environment to teach the player about the simple lock and key mechanic at the centre of the game. The one thing my game fell short on in the rankings from the judges was originality of gameplay. It's not exactly a bold new idea to have a cartoon mouse jumping around. So perhaps I could have mixed things up with a bit of a more unique gameplay mechanic, but even if I had done that, I would have needed to find a way to explain how that works without overwhelming the player. All of this leads me to my next piece of advice regarding difficulty. Suggestion number 3, make your game easier. This could have come under accessibility, but I felt like it deserved its own segment. I have a really bad habit when I'm designing games of playing it over and over, memorizing the level layout, getting very familiar with the gameplay, and then feeling that it's too easy and upping the difficulty. Don't do that. Just don't. It is a really bad idea if you want anyone to play your game for more than 8 seconds. Game jams are like arcades. There are a bunch of different games all available to the player or to the judge at the same time, and some games are going to catch their eye more than others. If you want to be that game, then there are certain things that you have to do to make your submission a little bit more user-friendly. Good art or music helps naturally, and it also helps a lot if the game's core mechanic is taught in a way that makes sense to the player. But most importantly, you want to avoid anything that is going to make the player bounce off. There are too many other distractions, too many other games that they could potentially be playing. My initial plan with Fortune and Glory was to make an old school 8-bit game with an old school 8-bit difficulty. I wanted it to be tough but fair, with a game over screen that took you back to the start if you ran out of lives. I handed the game to my #1 playtester, my daughter, and she was immediately put off by how punishing the game was. Especially by the fact that she had to start all over if she ran out of lives. Other playtesters agreed the game was just too difficult. It wasn't anywhere near as brutal as a lot of the games that I was trying to emulate, but it's not 1991 anymore. People don't expect to play a game that actively hates them. So I added a modern mode for anyone who wants to have infinite lives, and I added the option to continue from the start of the level on the game over screen. When I showed it to a friend of mine who runs his own game jam, and I asked his opinion on difficulty, he said, quote, "I always encourage easier over harder. You don't want to give people a reason to click off and try one of the other hundreds of games, and punishing difficulty is one reason for that. Though that doesn't mean that the game has to be super easy. Just avoid aggravating things like far apart checkpoints and repeating too much content. That's a click off moment." End quote. The other benefit of making the game easier is it meant people saw more of the game, and given that I was trying to recreate that 90s cartoon aesthetic, that was important for me. I wanted people to actually see what I had drawn. One final piece of advice and then I will wrap up this video. Suggestion number 4. Start small, stay small. Fortune and Glory, the Game Jam version anyway, takes about 20 minutes for me to complete. Admittedly, I know the game back to front and have played it a lot more than anyone else ever will. When I submitted the game to the Jam, I was genuinely worried that I hadn't made enough content, that people were going to play for a few minutes, beat the thing, and then feel like it was lacking. Turns out, nope, nobody even mentioned to me that they thought the game was too short. No matter the timescale of a game jam, it is best to start small and assume that you have half as much time as you think you need. GB Compo ran for 3 months, which is a fairly lengthy game jam, and I spent the first month building the levels, the second month fine-tuning them and adding graphics, and the third month playtesting and polishing. That was all the time that I had, and it worked out well. The teddy bear game I mentioned, that wasn't meant to be just a teddy bear game. It was meant to be a game where you said goodbye to a bunch of different people before leaving for university. I ran out of time to build that, and so I just took the one chunk of it that I thought worked best as a standalone experience and turned that into a game. I have since put a lot of work into trying to finish my initial vision for that game. It has been years and years and years at this point, and I haven't finished one of the 5 chapters that I intended to make. There is a good chance that that game is just too ambitious. So start small with Game Jam games. You can always go back later and add more content and flesh it out into a full release. That is something that has been done with plenty of games over the years, such as Hollow Knight. So now it is time for me to run this Kickstarter. It is the single most anxiety-inducing thing that I have done in a very, very long time. It is just a little bit terrifying. I think after so many years of half-completed projects, of things that I've never quite finished, of things that I've run out of steam with, it is genuinely scary to me to know that I could actually finish something and that I could actually put it out into the world for people to see. It's terrifying. There's a part of me that's always going to think that it's not quite ready for the Kickstarter yet, that there's more that I could do to get it ready, that I could polish it up, that I could shine it up some more. But I have to just draw a line under it and say, no, This is about as good as it is ever going to be. I need to put it out there and let people see it. So if you want to help me out, not just financially, but emotionally, please do check out the game's Kickstarter. Please do let me know what you think. Play the game on itch.io and hopefully play the finished game once I release that as well. Anyway, the moral of this story is everything that I've said up until this point. But the moral that I think I need to hear right now and that I want to share with you last of all is exactly that. Make something and then put it out there for people to see. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be exactly what you imagined in your head. But make something and then let it go. Thank you for watching.